Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the running backs on the Week 13 slates on FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo. As always, would appreciate it if you consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, maybe leaving a comment below if you have any questions about running backs on this slate. Be happy to talk to you down there. Also consider joining our Discord, where we have Occupy staff and other members talking about every single DFS slate every single day. So we'd love to see you in there. This week is another week where we're monitoring injuries at the running back position. And thankfully, obviously we don't want to see anybody get injured, but we already have a little bit of sense of direction because of some of the news is already in. We know that Dalvin Cook won't be playing here in Week 13. Unfortunately, unlike earlier in the year where the situation popped up and he wasn't priced up as much as this, Alexander Madison is a great play once again, but he's not cheap. He's $7,600 here on DraftKings, $8,700 over on FanDuel for this matchup against the Detroit Lions. Madison with 2 starts this year in games that Cook did not play. He has 82% of the carries in those games for the Vikings, just under 21% of team targets. That's an astronomical role. By the way, they're playing the Lions this week. Madison, a very, very strong play. I think he's probably a top 2 play, if not number 1 play from a raw fantasy point projection standpoint this week. This is an unbelievably good matchup for Alexander Madison. So even though the price is a little more expensive than it has been in prior weeks where we got this spot, we should probably be considering him extremely heavily this week. Another running back that may miss this game here in Week 13, we got to monitor the news here out of the Los Angeles Rams camp, is Darrell Henderson. He has a quad injury, and this is maybe my favorite spot to monitor right now because of the price here of the backup involved. Sonny Michel, just $4,300 here on DraftKings, $5,300 over on FanDuel. That would be for you MME, GPP players, quote-unquote, lock button territory if we get a Sonny Michel start here against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Rams hosting the Jaguars here, pretty large favorites, pretty simple. If Henderson is out, Michel is the guy. We don't know whether that's going to be the case yet. Jamaal Williams, another running back that's probably going to be heavily considered by the field because it doesn't look like DeAndre Swift is going to be available to play after the injury that he suffered on Thanksgiving against the Chicago Bears. Obviously, Williams got a ton of the touches for the Lions in that game. He's got a pretty modest salary this week, $5,400 on DraftKings, $6,500 over on FanDuel, and definitely will have the highest touch expectation in that backfield. The only problem here, of course, is it's the Lions, and they're obviously huge underdogs here against the Vikings at home. Now for the good players everybody wants to hear more about. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is unbelievable. Jonathan Taylor is the most expensive player on this slate, but he's probably worth trying to get up to, especially in low-risk formats. Houston allowing the 11th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs this year. They have a top 10 blocking offensive line. They're a little higher than that. I believe they're ranked 7th, according to Football Outsiders. They're bottom 25% rush defense. This is a player that has a tremendous hold on the job for the Colts. His touch volume has scaled way up. Nyheim Hines' playing time has scaled way down. Jonathan Taylor is like the best running back in football, not just from the output perspective. You know, obviously the statistics have been there, but when you look at the usage is unbelievable as well. 74% of team carries, 16.7% of team targets over the last 3 weeks of play for the Colts. That's a very strong role. And don't overlook, he has the strongest red zone role in the league. He has 64 red zone carries, 64 carries inside the 20. The next closest player is Minnesota's Dalvin Cook, who has 37. Like this, he's getting way more touches than anybody else in the red zone. Plain and simple, Jonathan Taylor, priced up for a reason, probably worth the price of admission here in Week 13. I like Eli Mitchell a lot this week. It's an interesting place to go next. $6,000 here on DraftKings, $7,600 on FanDuel. Seattle is allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs this year. They're just crushing against the Seahawks. Seahawks are unable to move the sticks and keep their offense on the field. That's allowing opposing offenses to just dominate the tempo. That'll allow a team like the 49ers that prefers to run the football when things are going well to do exactly that and feed Eli Mitchell. 49ers are probably going to be without Deebo Samuel here in Week 13, which means they'll have even more reason to utilize Eli Mitchell in the backfield. They've been using Deebo a little bit more in recent weeks as a runner, so to speak, right? So definitely feel like Eli Mitchell will benefit more than anybody else on this roster from him being unavailable. Obviously, at the running back position, that would be true. 70% of the carries, 11% of the targets in this offense over his last 3 games. That's obviously an extremely strong role as well at an extremely affordable price. And unlike some of the guys I talked about earlier in the video, we know Eli is the starting running back. So I think he's a strong play here in week 13. Yeah, great. Let's talk about the guy who just scored 4 touchdowns everybody's going to be thinking about. We probably need to, because Leonard Fournette is the other guy other than Jonathan Taylor that has a phenomenal red zone role. Doesn't have nearly as many carries, but his 12 red zone targets are elite, and that combined with his carries in the red zone for the Bucs actually gives him a weighted opportunity role, which weighs those targets a little bit heavier than the carries. That is very similar to Jonathan Taylor's role in the red zone. It's a pretty good argument that Leonard Fournette and Jonathan Taylor are the 2 best red zone running backs in the NFL right now. Tampa Bay, a large favorite against the Falcons this week. Probably wise not to expect another 4 touchdown performance from Leonard Fournette, but he's still in a great spot to succeed as the Bucs are giant favorites. Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon and the Bengals. Going to be popular on this slate. Probably think it'll be one of the more popular offenses that people will be stacking in tournament lineups. The Chargers allow the most rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. The Chargers allow the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And Mixon is back up to an elite workload. 73% of team carries, just under 10% of team targets in the last 3 weeks for the Cincinnati Bengals. Mixon may actually also come in at a pretty reasonable roster percentage as well, really anywhere you play, because it does feel like people are going to try to get to either Jonathan Taylor or some of these value backs I've already spoken about in this video. So you may actually have a good opportunity to get Mixon at a little lower roster rate than maybe he should carry in week 13. Some other guys that I think are worth considering that I'm looking at this early juncture. Saquon Barkley probably will see the work that he's expected to do go up without Daniel Jones in there. Daniel Jones obviously a lot more mobile than Mike Glennon is, but just a tough spot in general to see the Giants being productive as an offense, so I'm not sure about that. Josh Jacobs against the football team. Modestly priced, 6,000 DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. Still the main running back in the backfield here. 58% roughly of the carries, I think is what I have it at over the last few weeks for them. But like 20% of the targets of players that we're expecting to play. You're obviously removing Darren Waller, who is expected to miss this game from the equation for the Raiders. Might make some of the other players a little more interesting here. Josh Jacobs would be one of them. Antonio Gibson. Obviously watched the touches on Monday Night Football against the Seahawks really spike up there. Had an extraordinarily strong opportunity to touch the football in that game. Probably going to see the same thing here on the road against the Raiders. Obviously, J.D. McKissic was carted off on Monday Night Football, tweeted out that he should be okay. We'd love to see that from a real-life perspective, but from a football perspective, not practicing here on Wednesday, trending in the wrong direction to be available. Could be a good week for Antonio Gibson if he is unavailable to play. Raiders allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Gibson with like 61% of team carries, 10% of team targets. That includes with McKissic in the lineup. So McKissic out of the lineup could spell an increase in workload for Gibson, and that would be an interesting value play as well here in week 13. Those are really the main guys that I'm considering this week at the running back position. But keep an eye out for the daily plug that we will publish over at OccupyFantasy.com. That's where we'll have not just our favorite running back plays for you, but also our favorite quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends to consider for your lineups. And not just the players that you need to consider for your lineups, but how to play them appropriately for the type of contest that you're playing. We give you recommendations for how to play, whether it's low-risk contests, those would be your 50-50s head-to-heads or double-ups, or high-risk contests, those would be your satellites, your tournaments, your large field contests here like the Millionaire Maker. It's really important to keep in mind what type of contest you're playing and then how to deploy the players that you like appropriately for the contest that you're in. We try to give you the edge on that. It's the most important part of the plug. Make sure that you read it. As always, we really would appreciate it if you consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video. Leave a comment below. Did I talk about every single running back that you wanted to hear about, or is there another one that you're wondering about for week 13? We'd love to engage with you in there. You can also consider joining our Discord, where we have staff and members talking about every DFS slate throughout the entire year. Once again, for Occupy, I'm Chris. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll talk to you soon.